So, I hope I'm center there. The Grownup by Gillian Flynn is a short story. It's like probably 60, 70 pages long, and it's, ooh, okay, ignore that. That was just something like slightly a book on my bookshelf kind of tipped over. Anyway, but yeah, so this came out 2014, I believe, and it is almost a perfect pick for Halloween because I'm usually not into kind of the classic horror genre. I think it's like a little bit too much kind of a fantasy, kind of too many things are like imagined and kind of contrived out of thin air, like ghosts and demons and stuff. But this has those things, but it's in a kind of a it's used and subverted in a way that's against kind of the traditional norm. So yeah, Gillian Flynn, I've read Gone Girl by her, and that's all I read. I've added some other things to my wish list. So, and this year's getting pretty hectic, coming to the close of it, and be with my ridiculous kind of inventory of books that I've been trying to keep in mind. But I have her book. I would like to review Gone Girl as well. Obviously, another favorite. Movie especially too, and I believe she actually collaborated on the screenplay too, so it wasn't just this kind of like a long done thing. It was like like a couple years after she published the book. So but yeah, so The Grown-Up it's narrated by a young lady who doesn't really reveal much about herself, so we don't know her name. She basically starts kind of in kind of media res, just kind of talking about how she's a sex worker, and not really say like outright how she like works as a kind of, or how she kind of made a living, but how she kind of with her mother had to kind of survive for herself, and she brings kind of a backstory that makes things come together in a way that makes sense. And she has basically doesn't see her mother for a while, and because her father left her, and they end up kind of learning how to kind of con people so this is kind of more of a story of a con artist than just so she's just a sex worker, and that's like that's just that's just kind of like the stereotype, I guess. But yeah, she's trying to basically make ends meet, and now she's doing it more for she's doing more of a palm reading thing with this older lady, and they basically have run this shop where the older lady normally does the palm readings and like tells people like their aura and they have a future, and then it's very like intense, but it's also kind of a lot of it's hogwash. And then so the narrator doesn't really believe any of that. She doesn't really catch on or doesn't really buy any of that stuff. But she pretends to kind of take over for this other woman and to kind of like make a little more money on the side. So she's like kind of leaning into that role. And yeah, so she starts telling the story, and then basically there's these guys that she usually has, kind of sex work interactions where they're like very kind of, they don't talk, they don't do this, they don't bare their soul really. It's just she's very direct and kind of, you have to be in the control of the situation, I guess, and she's not really, whereas the fortune teller is supposed to be more what's the word? More intuitive or more. So they kind of run the shop like clockwork, where she does that, and then so she's basically talking about how it's like kind of the implicit role of once you get into doing that kind of like palm reading, like the next kind of logical step of that, she jokes. But yeah, it's kind of really deadpan, and she's like talking about how one middle-aged woman named Susan shows up and talks about her, how her marriage is kind of, it's not so bad, and she's like well off, and she has a mansion, but they just bought it, and they have a strained relationship with their son Miles because he's adopted. One of them was adopted, and then the other boy was hers. So the younger boy is hers, and then the eldest son, the grown-up, is Miles, who's like very put on to be very eerie, very, very kind of aloof and mysterious, and just with like sociopathic tendencies are like highly, implied. But as things go on, things are revealed and subverted in such a way so the narrator ends up going to the house to kind of like cleanse it, with like to take pour salt around the place and do all this stuff. And she's kind of like a little bit like not resentful of Susan, but like kind of like thinks she's a little bit kind of just, she feels sorry for her in a way, but more pity, just kind of like pity, because she sees Susan as this desperate middle-aged woman who's insecure and that, like doesn't really has the money to kind of waste on like this person that's not really going to tell her anything about this house, and that there's implying that there's like blood in the house as well, and that she saw like blood pour out, and then things get a little bit out of hand, and then she, after going to the house herself, Miles kind of like warns her and says that like you should leave, like you should, it's not good that you're here, and it's like this whole kind of debacle kind of escalates into Susan, things are turning around, so it's actually Susan who, spoiler, if you want to read the book yourself, this is what I'm going to spoil the hell out of it. But yeah, so Susan was planning the whole thing all along. Like, she planned it in such a way, succinctly, to get her into the place, to lure the narrator into the place and be like, because, oh yes, I forgot, the narrator, unbeknownst to her, was kind of having, a prostitutional kind of thing going on with Susan's husband. So there's like there's a lot of bile on Susan's part for her husband that's unfaithful to her, and then she kind of involves the narrator to kind of like get back at her and to get back at him, her husband, but her husband's in a different country, I think, business, and they're both like really rich, and they're able to afford this place, and it's like a kind of very kind of morbid, lonely house. It's like you can hear, it's like the emptiness in the walls. It's like, it's very, very just like not a good impression. But yeah, so she does more stuff, and then basically, Susan even like fabricates this whole story online about how the house is haunted, and like there's like this family before them, I think the Clearton family, that were murdered by their own son, and more often than not, like things like that actually happen. Like you get these strange murders. Like I recently learned that Frank Lloyd Wright's family, there was a man I can't remember his name, but he was one of the servants that actually, he was like in his 30s, that killed the entire family, like most of Frank Lloyd Wright's family, and it was like very grisly. Like he morbid, like he just like poured gasoline all over the place, and then tried to commit suicide, but ended up dying later because he took like hydrochloric acid, I think, to kind of poison himself. So he didn't live long in jail after that. But that was like, whoa, these things happen. So it's like it's not so far from reality. It's like the whole like someone who's bat crazy, like it's it's not they're out of nowhere, they're like maybe hallucinating and just out of, completely paranoid, because, he did show, some evidence for paranoia as well, like sleeping, with a butcher's knife. But anyway, that's besides the point. So anyway, so Susan actually lures everybody in the right place, and her plan was to kill her and make it look like she shot her out of self-defense and that she wouldn't go home. And it's like, it's all like comes together in a very clever way. That's like, it's like really, it's a classic kind of, like in the same way that Amy Dunn has all these things figured out. She's like pre-planned them, everything to come interwoven, and it's things to, so everything is perfect. And then when the one thing gets out of hand, like when it kind of like ruins the whole house of cards. So anyway, but yeah, that is all I have for The Grownup by Gillian Flynn. And yeah, thanks for watching. That was only 9 minutes. I don't know.